Afternoon. Today we have Sharice Ronis with the Bismarck Public Schools, and she is going to be talking about Sorry, I think I got cut off there. We have Sharice Ronis with the Bismarck Public School System today presenting on the homeless youth in our school system. Again, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box and I will relay them as we go along. Thank you, and turning it over to you, Sharice.
Okay. I will just try to get set up here. I just want to see. So do we see where it says next slide as well? Are you seeing that, or you just see one slide?
We see the, like all the slides on the side, the left side, and then the main page.
So
if you go to click on the from the beginning, and I think it should all go away.
Oh, see, it's not, it hasn't done that yet because hold on. I don't know why it won't, hold on. Sorry. Okay, what are you seeing now? Anything?
No.
Okay. All right, share.
We can use the other, can we just not the water, or do you have it all for?
Okay, so now what do you see?
You're sharing it now.
Yep.
Okay. Do you see all the other slides though, like where it says next slide?
Yes.
You see that too?
Yep.
Okay, I don't want that, but I don't know how to get that off. So I don't know how to make this bigger. Just make this the, oh well. Well, I guess we'll start, and I apologize for it not, I don't know if this makes a difference. Is that better? Do you just see one screen now? Like
there
me?
we go. Yep.
Yay. Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so my name is Sharice Ronis, and I am the Bismarck Public Schools Homeless Liaison. And I just wanted to start by kind of, so you know who I'm about and where do I get my information from. I'm not just coming in off the street and giving you a bunch of stuff that I think is happening. This is stuff that I've been experiencing. I have been working with at-risk youth and families for over 20 years. I'm a social worker by trade, so that is what my degree is. I'm licensed in North Dakota. I have been working in this current position at the school system for 5 years, or plus a little bit over 5 years. And then I have the background in working with Bismarck Public or Burleigh County Health, Social Services, Juvenile Drug Court, Youth Works, outreach work, kind of a vague and a huge area of places that I come from. So my position here, what I do is I work for all 23 schools in the Bismarck Public School System. So I don't work with Mandan, I just work Bismarck. And we have between the elementary schools, middle school, high schools, we have 23, soon to be 25 in the year or two coming, with 2 new elementary schools coming. I also work with the 0 through 5 age range programs that we have. So we have our early childhood, BSEP, those kind of programs that provide services to the 0 through 5. And then I also work with GED kids. So any kid up to the age of 21, because that's how long a school district can serve. a child till the age of, they qualify to be under our Students in Transition program, which I'll talk a little bit about coming up. But my biggest role in my job here is to find and identify the homeless youth in our areas, which can be trying at times. Sometimes they can be hard to find. Sometimes they don't want to be found, or they don't want you to know what their situation is, so they don't give you the correct information at first. So sometimes it takes a while to get that information from families that they really are struggling in their home life. And so I also, once I identify those kids, I help those families and assist them to get any resources connected in the community that might help them in their current struggles. So that can be housing, food, Medicaid, food stamps, trying to get them connected with the proper agencies in town that can offer them services to maybe help better their situation. And then I also, the bigger part is that I help the students in their day-to-day stuff regarding their education. So we want them to have the same experience as any other student that we have in our mainstream schooling, who are not struggling with where they're living and their residency and things like that. So we just want to make sure we kind of wrap our arms around them, those little kiddos, and make sure that we can make it the best possible experience for them. So that's kind of my day-to-day stuff that I do. So just out of curiosity, and now I went out of my chat, so I can't even see what you guys say, but in the chat, if you want to just guess for me. So our school year last year obviously ended a little bit abruptly because of COVID, but we were still working hard behind the scenes. So how many youth do you think were in the Bismarck area alone last year at the end of the whole entire school year that we identified? Okay.
1,200, 150, 25, 750.
Somebody cheated.
515, 510, 256, 3,000, 250.
Okay. Oh my God, the people who are in the thousands, dear Lord, no. Like I hope not, because it's a hard enough time trying to get to the ones that we do identify. But yes, so if you cheated, you obviously know what the answer is, and it was 514. And so those are not just the kids K through 12, those are the kids 0 through 5, as well as the kids that we have in GED. And I'll go a little bit down the road here. I'm going to go into the statistics of Bismarck Public School System since we started having what we call the Students in Transition program. Those are kids who are considered homeless or in temporary housing. We don't like to use the word homeless, obviously, because it can be very derogatory, but sometimes to get the point across or explain somebody, we have to use the word homeless, but we do try to use in transition. So that's why we use Students in Transition as the name of the program that I coordinate here that provides those services for those kids. So what does that mean, or what does that look like? So society's definition, I think abroad amongst the United States, amongst the world probably, is when we think of a homeless person, and if we had 4 seconds to describe what we saw in our mind, it would most likely be somebody in a street, whether they're standing, sitting, laying, dirty clothes, maybe under newspapers or in a tent, but somebody that is displaced and is in a situation that is not ideal for them to be in regards to living. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. There's kind of 2 definitions when it comes to my world about homeless. And so when we talk about the youth and the youth that are in my program, we actually identify them differently a little bit than we do with the HUD definition. And I'll go over that as well. So you kind of know the differences, but there are many ways for a child to be considered homeless or in transition that qualify for the program that we run through BPS that helps them with extra services. So the basic definition is the children who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So children who might not know where they're going to lay their head down every night. I describe it to a lot of people as it's a temporary home, a temporary fix. So they might have a roof literally over their head, but it's not theirs or their parents. And that at any given moment, for any reason beyond their control, they can be asked to leave, and that they would have to leave legally because they're not on a lease, or they're not listed to live there in a legal sense. So those kind of look a couple different ways. So we have our hotel or motel kiddos. And so these are families that usually are living in a motel. You know, we want to say temporary, but sometimes they're living in them for months and months. And the reason they're doing that is because they maybe have a felony in their background. And so they're not eligible to get housing assistance, or maybe even rent from some landlords who don't rent from felons. Their credit could be extremely bad to where they wouldn't even pass anything if they went and did a background check or a credit check for an apartment to rent. Excuse me. Or maybe they already owe money somewhere. So sometimes if they owe money from a previous landlord, or even they were on housing and they end up owing money for housing for maybe damages or something that happened in their past, they're not able to get or eligible to get housing assistance. And so they're kind of, you know, at their wits' end as far as where they can go. And so these hotels don't have any of those things. They don't look in any of those things. They don't care about those things. They, you know, they will rent to them. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not the best place for families, especially children, to be. The environment is not the best. And so we, you know, as school personnel, we worry about that and worry about their safety. And also, you know, I can say from my experience here that some of these motels do price gouge these families ridiculously, to the point where if they can pay that week by week for 2 months straight, I don't understand how they wouldn't be able to rent from a landlord, because they would be paying way less to a landlord than they would to the week or so that they're staying in the hotel. And so we come across those cases as well. Obviously campgrounds. So, you know, North Dakota is not known for its best camping all year round, but we do have families that is their only option. And so if they do have a camper, sometimes they don't just go to campgrounds. They'll go to parking lots. They'll go to a friend's house a couple days until they kind of get kicked off the street there. But I do go around to the campgrounds in the fall when I come back and see if we have any families or any kids that have been staying there through the summer, and to see if that they're going to be planning on attending school here, or if they're going to be moving on to somewhere else. Obviously our emergency or transitional shelters. So we have the United Way Emergency Shelter here in Bismarck. And then we also have the Welcome House, which is a family shelter. And then we have Youth Works, which is considered transitional shelter for kids 18 to 24 that they work with, and help them get everything situated financially in regards to getting a job, finishing school, and then helping them find an apartment so they could be on their own. So that's what we consider transitional shelters here. Substandard housing. So obviously this is not designed for a person to live in. And so what I see here is we have maybe it's a car storage unit, could be a garage, and maybe there's a living quarters upstairs above, or even storage units to where there's no running water, there's no heat. It's basically just a roof over their head to protect from the wind and the outside, you know, dangers that come with being outside overnight, especially in North Dakota. So we don't consider them to be, even if they say that they're renting that to keep their car in, but yet they're living in it, that's not sufficient housing for anybody to be living in. So they would be considered in the program as well. And then the two biggest groups that we have for kiddos in the program, the first one is Doubled Up. So this is a family that might have been evicted, whether they were evicted here in town, whether they were evicted in Alabama, whether they were evicted from their country. And they come over here because they have family here, or they know somebody here that says, come live with us till you get back on your feet. You guys can stay with us. And so they'll move into, you know, sometimes that's family, sometimes it's friends. And it's basically due to that financial hardship of them being evicted and not being able to afford right away to get something on their own. And so maybe they're just staying there until, you know, until things get better for them, they can save some money. Sometimes I know that is the intention of these families, and they end up staying there for, you know, for a significant amount of time. But again, because it's temporary, they considered under the program. I use the example because this actually happened. One of my first years working here is I had a mom come in and tell me that she had been evicted. She'd been living in her sister's house for 4 months or so with her 2 kids. And, you know, they had kind of been lately going back and forth a little bit on nitpicky things in the house. The kids weren't cleaning up. She thought they were too loud and those kinds of things. And so they were having some arguments, but the final argument that this lady ended up kicking them out, literally at that moment, get out, here's your stuff, help them throw out the stuff into the yard. Do not come back here. I am done. Was because her child burnt toast in the toaster and it made the house smell. And so that was her last straw. And so she said, nope, you guys are out and you can't come back. You need to find someplace else. So she didn't even give her a buffer time of, you got to be out by Friday. It was, you're out by tonight. And so then they were obviously in crisis mode and trying to look for someplace that evening. And so when we have the situation of the doubled up families, we find a lot of that where, you know, it might not be the most solid excuse or reason, but there's probably stuff leading up to it. Why they want that family out. Obviously, when we had COVID happen last year, we had a lot of families that were out because their family was like, hey, that's just more exposure to us, the possibility of exposure, you and your kids in here now. And so you need to find someplace else to stay. We saw that a lot last year in the March through, you know, July area when COVID kind of first became an issue here. And then the next group that we have a lot of kids in is called Unaccompanied. And this is something that an attorney could probably present on all day, going through different scenarios and situations, what an unaccompanied youth is. The easiest way I can explain it is that it's a child living with somebody that is not their biological parent. And that there's no custody or anything legal documentation indicating that they are the guardian or that they're the caregiver. So we have lots of families that maybe mom and dad are incarcerated, or mom and dad are not well enough. Maybe they have addiction issues, mental health issues. They can't care for their children. And so either the grandparents say, hey, you know, we're gonna take them in while you guys, you know, get your act together, or the parents end up going off to jail and it really wasn't known, you know, before that they were going to go off to jail for a period of time, and so somebody takes in those kids. You know, we have cases where you know, we have a lot of culture with the Native American culture here in Bismarck, and so we do have a lot of families that take in their relatives because that's a cultural thing. That's what they do. Family takes care of family. And so sometimes those aren't necessarily considered, they're unaccompanied youth by law, but not eligible for the program that we provide here because that is something that was set up beforehand, or that if it is a cultural thing, it's just that that's something that they do. And so sometimes they don't qualify for the services, but they're definitely considered an unaccompanied youth until they get some kind of a legal document. Now, I know some of you might know what a power of attorney is, or a power of parent form. It's just a form that's notarized by one family saying, I'm going to let my sister, Mary, take my kids and she can make all the educational decisions and medical decisions for that kid. And I'm okay with it. And then Mary signs it as well. And then it's notarized. Those usually last 6 months, but they are not a legal document. They can be ripped up at any point as soon as one party says, nope, I don't want it anymore, that it's null and void. So we don't consider that legal. It's anything that goes in front of a district judge, juvenile court, tribal court. Even if the document says temporary guardianship, but a judge signed off on it, that's legal. That's permanent in the eyes of the McKinney-Vento, which is, I'll go over in a little bit here. But so anything going under a judicial system does not count for them to be homeless.
Therese, we have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is it possible they can't get an apartment because of the background check, and that's why they pay week to week at a motel, etc.?
Yes, background checks. So meaning if they have the felonies, or sometimes if they have an aggressive or a violent charge, like a domestic violence charge, if a landlord does not accept those on the background check that comes through, then yeah, they would have a hard time finding yeah, you know, finding a place other than the hotel. Hotels don't look at that stuff. Unless obviously things start happening at the hotel, police are called all the time. There's maybe domestics or fights or those kinds of things, bad behavior. And then they would ask them to leave. That has happened as well for our families. Yes. All right. So this is the unaccompanied youth, just explained a little bit better. So as I said before, basically a child that's not living with their biological parents for some reason, and there's no legal. So we have also a great deal of unaccompanied youth that are high school age kids, maybe even junior high kids that have a parent conflict. So they're not getting on with their parents, they're constantly fighting. And whether the parents say to them, you're out, you can, if you're, you know, want to be an adult, you can figure it out on your own, don't come back here. Or whether the child saying, I'm not coming back there, I don't like your rules, I'm going to go stay somewhere. We don't get into those kind of aspects of what, other than that there is a conflict and that child has been removed or chose to be away from that home, from their parents' home. And so we have kids who are what we call couch surfers, which is self-explanatory. They'll go from one place to another, one friend to the other, maybe a family friend, maybe a family member, then to a friend, then back to the family member because they can only be there so long. But we have a lot of kids, and because there's any kind of a parental conflict that's creating that barrier for them to be in their home with their family, they're considered an unaccompanied youth under the program as well. So we help out kids that have those issues. And, you know, if you think about it, if we have a lot of even like 16, 17-year-old kids that are living on their own. And now, you know, they still want to go to school. They want to get their high school diploma. But everything that was, you know, helping them do that now has been taken away. So they don't have, you know, their parents' money. Maybe their parents, now they don't have a cell phone. They don't have transportation because the parents have the car. So now how do they get to school? How do they finish school? How do they pay for anything? So obviously their anxiety and level of responsibility increases tremendously. And so we try to help, you know, kind of help them, guide them along a little bit, whether that's to try to reunify them with their parents, or if it's just not a safe situation, then, you know, then we try to figure out what is the best case scenario for that child. So when I talked about the definition with HUD, HUD has a different definition than what we do through the McKinney-Vento, which is a federal law that was created to protect homeless youth. And so the HUD's definition is, you know, an individual who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, which is the same as ours, but their meaning basically is, if, you know, if they have a prime time residence that is public. So if they are, you know, this doesn't include a family who's living with another family. It doesn't include the unaccompanied youth, or if they're living in a motel because they're saying, no, they got a roof over their head, they're good, they're not homeless. And so that's where we kind of have a big barrier and a big discrepancy in the meaning of what homeless means. So that means that there's less services available due to that definition gap, because they don't match what the Department of Education has for their youth. And so that means that there is less services available to kids because they don't, you know, they might not, like a unaccompanied youth or something, like they might not get housing because their definition doesn't match what HUD is. It matches for their educational purposes, but it doesn't match HUD or for any housing assistance. And there's been resistance in that. I was in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, and with our senators there, you know, there is a bill that's been trying to go through for a long time, trying to mesh these, you know, these definitions a little bit so they match a little bit better. And the resistance basically is, you know, they know that once they would change that definition to include the doubling up unaccompanied or the motel people, obviously that would fluctuate the people eligible for services immensely. And where's that funding come from? You know, and unfortunately it all comes back down to dollars. But that's where that resistance comes from up in the legislature. So. And then this is just I talked about the McKinney-Vento. So McKinney-Vento is a federal law that was put into place. And its basic purpose was to offer and make sure that each homeless child has equal access to the same appropriate public education, including that early childhood that any other child would have access to. And it helps so we don't discriminate against the homeless, and so we don't put them in a different category. We treat them equally and the same, that they shouldn't be separated. And each school district has to make sure that they're following the federal guidelines for McKinney-Vento and what that looks like for assisting a homeless child. And then this just talks about the school stability. So the biggest thing that McKinney-Vento wants to do is, you know, we have kids that hop all over, right, to different residences during the school year. And here in Bismarck, you're supposed to be attending your boundary school where you live. Well, that kid could be potentially bopping around to 4 or 5 different schools in one school year, if that's how we did it. Excuse me. So what we try to do is provide, sorry, I had to take a drink here. We want to try to provide some stability for their education. So sometimes kids go to school because it's the only safe place for them to go during the day. And if they can't get there, then that's a problem. And so we want to make sure that we can try and help that. So if we have a family that starts here in South Bismarck and then overnight sometime had to move up and stay with somebody in North Bismarck, but the parents don't have transportation and those kinds of things, instead of, you know, placing that kid up in that school for who knows how long, we want to keep them at their school of origin. So we do what we can to help out with transportation or whatever services they need to make sure that they can stay at that school of origin, where they've created those relationships, they feel comfortable, their friends are there, because it's already kind of a transition going on in their home life. And so if we can just keep this at least stable for them, they have something that is consistent that they can look forward to each day. So how do I go about identifying these kids? So biggest part is when they register for school, we have on our end of things, online application. If they answer 3 questions and they answer yes to one of those 3, it automatically gets kicked to me. And then I can start contacting that family and kind of finding more about their situation. Obviously, if they're in a shelter staff calls me and says, hey, we have this family, they have 3 kids, they need to be put in your program. I go around to the hotels and the campgrounds, getting my information out there. So we do have families that come there, they know to contact me. Other agencies within the community know to give me a holler if they are working with a family. And if they say, are you working with Sharice at the school? And they're like, who is that? Then obviously they don't know me. So they get them connected to me as well. Because of the river, the Mandan Public School Liaison and myself work closely together. Families that go back and forth actually quite often, sometimes throughout the school year between here and Mandan. And so we connect on those families. And then the biggest is the inter-school referrals for me. So the staff. So, and that's not just the social workers and the administration and all those. We're talking about the secretaries, the hub of information, right? Those guys know everything. If I want to know something about a kid, all I got to say is I'll call and I'll say, hey, Betty, did Jacob come to school today? Oh, yeah, but he was late. He came at 10:15, and then a lady in a red van dropped him off, and I've never seen her before. And then she was with this guy, and then she'll just, sometimes it's more information, but it is so helpful to me because those little things can add up in the end if something is going on with that child that we need to know about. And so it's the bus drivers, it's the lunch ladies, it's where we have adults, but the kids don't feel like that they're I don't want to say an authority figure, but somebody that's going to tattle on them or they're going to get in trouble if they hear me talking. So on the bus, we get lots of kids, they're talking to their friends and they'll say, yeah, I had to sleep in the stairwell of the hotel last night underneath the stairs. What? Underneath? Yep. And just having the conversation with their friends that bus driver might overhear, that we want to know about those kinds of things. Obviously, any other things that they talk about that we feel is unsafe, we want to know about too. But those are the ones where I get a lot of my information from. because the kids feel super comfortable talking about stuff in front of them or even to them and telling them things. So
Grace, I
here's
have
the
a
growth.
question.
Oh, yep, go ahead.
If someone is under 18, is the parent responsible to pay back the program that helps find their children whom they can't, quote unquote, get along with a home?
No, they don't. And we have plenty of families. I think people in this Bismarck area would be surprised of how many families we have that are, you know, money is not an issue. And they have these, whatever's going on with their kids and they can't get along and that kid leaves. So it has nothing to do with that they don't have, you know, the money, but we don't ask for them to pay back. These kids that come in are all treated the same. They get all the same services. So no, we don't ask because it's a federal program. We get grant money from the federal McKinney-Vento grant to serve all students that come in. So we never ask for repayment from anybody. So here's our trend for Bismarck Public School System. So this program first started in 2006, 2007. As you can see there, 136. And we've obviously had, you know, some huge fluctuation in during the oil boom. We had a lot, and actually in the years that I came, in the 2015-16 era, it was kind of after when things started to slow down a little bit out west, and people, the jobs started going, and so people started moving east. And then this was kind of the first, you know, one of the first big cities, and so they plopped down here. There also, since then, the high numbers have, there's not been one specific, oh, it was this. You know, we can say sometimes, oh, it was the oil boom, but really we saw a lot after the oil boom out there because they were migrating this way. We also have seen, and this is just my own personal, from meeting with all these families and saying, you know, what brings you to Bismarck? Why are you here? You know, those kinds of things. Because we have a lot of families that come and they have no family here. They don't know nobody here. They don't have housing here. They came with what they could fit in their car, and they drove from other states and lived in their car on the way here. And when I say, well, why Bismarck? And majority of them say there's jobs here. So we have this big North Dakota, you know, advertisement of come here, we have jobs. It's a great place to live, great place to raise kids, which is all absolutely true. But what they don't say is, but we don't have a lot of affordable housing. They don't use that on the end. And so these families come thinking, yep, we're going to make all this money, we're going to get these jobs. But they also don't realize that most of these jobs that are open are the retail and the fast food industry and the jobs that don't necessarily pay a ton of money for them to be able to go out and get. And we know, you guys know what it takes to do the first month's rent, security deposit. That's a good chunk of change to put up front for somebody who has nothing. And so to try and save money to get all of that up, but then also to save money so you can make sure that you can keep making your payments, obviously is a struggle for them. And so there's been plenty of times where, you know, we have a lot of people that come here from other countries. And that most of those are based on families. They already have family here. Family called and said, hey, we can get you a job. You can crash with us, come up here. It's great, you know? So we do have a lot of systems like that too, that go through here. But last year, you know, I don't think COVID for last year's numbers actually made a huge difference. We had a lot of families that were displaced last year before COVID hit. And there was not just one reason. There was a lot of reasons, and you know, I've listed them some in what I've talked about before with addiction and mental health, and it's a cycle, and not being able to, you know, afford everything up front, and not being able to get housing assistance, and those. It's kind of a, you know, there's a lot of different reasons. There's not just one. We wouldn't have the numbers we have now. You know, we are the biggest school district in North Dakota right now. We do have the highest numbers. I have a slide after this that talks about the other schools and places in town or in the state and where their numbers are. But, you know, I think 10 is too many, honestly, you know, for what these kids have to go through each day. So as you can see right now, currently, we have 341, excuse me, 341 kids. That is down. Do I feel like the homelessness is down? I don't. Again, because of COVID, we have had a lot of families that were struggling pre-COVID. It wasn't that they were, just fine and dandy before COVID hit, but they were struggling. And then they had those retail, those fast food, those jobs that got taken away for periods of time because places were closed. And then they lost, they lost their job and then haven't been able to pick it up since then. So we do have that, but the hard part is of us having to try to identify those kids. So we have, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we had a significant amount of students do homeschooling this year. A lot of them were students in transition. Unfortunately, those are the kids that we want in school. Those are the kids that we want to be in school and get, the 2 meals a day and get our eyes and ears on them and make sure that they're safe and what their needs are. And they homeschooled or they did distance learning. So those kiddos were hard to track down, those families, to find out what their actual living situation is. Fortunately, sometimes until something bad happens, we don't know that they are homeless or that they are, in a different situation than what we thought maybe they were. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. Maybe. No. So I wouldn't say that the problem has gone down. I feel like identifying these families this year has been much, much harder. And so that's why the numbers really don't reflect on what might actually be happening in our community. Excuse me. So this is what I just pulled from the DPI website. That's just some numbers. This is from last year's school year. So you can kind of see, I just picked some cities, can kind of see where we're at with the homeless youth that had been identified. I was really surprised at that. Well, I wasn't, but I was. At the 332 up in Williston, obviously with, what's going on in that community up there, we have a lot of families that are in transition, a lot of temporary homes up there. So, but just think about how big Williston is, school-wise, community-wise, and then think about how big Bismarck is and where our numbers are. I mean, so Wilson's pretty heavy. They were pretty heavy last year with kids who were identified. So this is something that I just do for people who don't necessarily work in this line of work every day like I do. And so it's kind of, you hear it every day because you're meeting with these families, you're talking to the kids. But just to kind of think about a day in the life of what a kid in transition goes through. And it starts right when they wake up. Sometimes when they wake up, they might not remember, because if they're going from place to place to place every night, or if they're in a car and every place they wake up, it's different, they might not right away kind of that morning of, oh, wait, where am I now? What's going on? Whose couch am I on? Do I know this lady? Those kind of trying to remember the night before where we were at, what we were doing, how did we end up here, kind of a thing. Not getting breakfast sometimes unless they can get it at school. We really try to make sure that, especially the transition kids, get breakfast if they end up late coming to school, that we do get them some kind of breakfast, something in their belly in the mornings. Do they have clean clothes? Most of the times not, because they're just going with what backpack or duffel bag or suitcase that they have in and out, and they're throwing clothes here and there. Sometimes it's the same clothes every day that they're wearing. Do you have hygiene products to brush your teeth, comb your hair, just all those basic things that we get up in the morning and they're right there? They don't have those. So they come and their breath probably smells when they come to school, or they're not able to, comb their hair. So it doesn't look very nice. And so obviously then what happens, especially in elementary, you get kids who start, teasing and bullying and making comments about their appearance. Do they have a ride to school? If they've been bebopping around and mom and dad don't have a vehicle, well, now how am I going to get to school? Because I was riding the bus, but now the bus isn't going to pick me up because I'm way up here. So how am I going to get to school? And a lot of anxiety comes from that initial not being able to get to school. These kids want to get to school. I've had kids who have gotten up, and they're elementary age. They have gotten up because mom and dad have not gotten up and are still sleeping. They get up, they do what they know how to do with what they have, and they walk to school. And so because they just want to be there, they want to get there, and we're talking miles. Like they'll walk a lot before we can figure out that that's what's going on, and set up transportation for them. So they want to be there. Most kids want to be there. Most of them will come and they'll be extremely tired. These are kids who are, going around from maybe a shelter to a place, to here, to there. Sleep is not going to happen very good for these kids. There's maybe sometimes there's parties going on. They don't feel safe where they're at. They're scared. Sometimes they're left there and mom and dad are off doing something and they're left with somebody they don't know. So they're scared. So sleep doesn't come easy for a lot of these kiddos. So they sleep during the day. Whether that's they have to go into the nurse's office because they're completely passed out, or they just take a nap in their classroom with their teacher during the day, and then at lunch, either they're eating everything they can, taking as many helpings as they can because they're not sure if they're going to eat later, or they're hoarding the food. They're trying to stick it in their pockets. They know later they might not have something, but if they stick this in their pocket, they'll know later they at least have a snack. Possible stomach aches, aches and pains from malnourishment could be, or just the anxiety. A lot of kids, that's how they present anxiety, is they got a stomach ache, they got a headache, they got this, they got that, just because of anxiety about about these next couple questions here. Gets towards the end of the day, we see a lot of kids their behavior start acting up. We can just tell that their anxiety level is super high. And they're like, well, who's picking me up? Because mom and dad don't have a car. So are they sending somebody for me? Am I going to know this person? Will I get picked up on time? Because last time they didn't come till like 4:30. And then the teacher said she was going to call the police because my parents were coming and we couldn't call them because they don't have a phone. Where am I going to stay tonight? Where are we going tonight? Can we go back to that place? I don't want to go back to that place. I don't like that place. We're going to have food. Are we going to be able to eat something later? Before I go to bed, am I going to go to bed hungry? Am I be able to take a shower or a bath? I haven't done that in like 3 or 4 days. When am I going to do that again? And then the biggest one is, am I safe? Wherever I go, am I safe? I mean, yes, mom and dad are here, but do I feel safe here? What's the kind of situation where I'm at? So these are all things that these kids go through every single day, and they lay down, repeat every day. And then we wonder why some of these kids, their education, their grades are bad, or their attendance is bad, or those kinds of things. They're going through this every day. And some of them, we don't know about it. Some of them, we have no idea that that's what they're going through. And so for us to find that out is just heartbreaking, because then we try to do what we can to make sure that they don't have to go through maybe half of what these things, these questions they have every day. Maybe we can help out with half of them at least for them. And that's kind of our goal with these kids. So as landlords, I'm assuming that you guys come across, families all the time in transition. And just as another perspective, because I come from like I said, the social work background, just to kind of keep in mind sometimes when you're working with families, and I know that they are not sometimes the best families to work with, but sometimes there's these things behind it and why. Obviously, they can be ashamed of their situation and embarrassed. And so they'll try to hide that. They try to hide it with me. And this is my job. They know I'm here to help and I can provide assistance for them and I can connect them to resources in the community. But it will take, like I said, sometimes something bad has to happen in order for us to realize, they're living in their car, or they're, living in a storage unit, or they're out in a campground, or they're, outside even in a park. So just that being ashamed and being embarrassed, it's a full scale thing. It's not just, with their landlord or with their co-workers or those kinds of things. They're obviously scared and have a lot of fear, not knowing what's going to happen, just like those kiddos every day. How are they going to provide for their family? Are they going to be able to eat supper? Where are they going to sleep tonight? Those kinds of things. Can I keep my kids safe? I mean, that's a huge responsibility. And they're exhausted, not just physically, but mentally, just exhausted every day to try to keep up about where I'm going to go, where we're going to be. Are the kids going to be safe? Are we going to eat? Those kinds of things. It can be super exhausting to go back and forth every day on that. Obviously, they have anxiety and they're angry. A lot of them are angry, and they're angry at themselves, and they're angry at the situation. They're angry at the system. And even if they're angry at themselves, it comes out that they're angry at everybody else. It's everybody else's fault why I'm here, not mine. And they don't want to take that responsibility because we know deep down inside that would probably hurt pretty bad. And so they don't want to deal with it. Not having that lack of control, not knowing where the next meal is, where you're staying. Is your car going to run out of gas tonight? Where am I going to get money if it does? Those kinds of things, not having that control that we do when, I leave here, I'm going to go home and I'm going to have supper because I can control that. I can do that. It's not something that I worry about other than what am I going to do, which is every day. But that I can do it is never a concern for me. And then they're hungry. You know, I know that we use that term hangry very loosely to describe people who get, you know, just mad and angry, like a different personality when they're hungry. But think about having that like all the time, like that feeling all the time. If your basic needs aren't being met, you can't provide for anybody else because you're consumed with what's going on physically with yourself, being hungry. And they feel at a really deep loss, you know, my life. You know, they could be suicidal. They could be, you know, thinking of ways to take their own life so they can just, you know, not have to deal with it anymore. And that's a deep loss, you know, of their dignity that they have every day too. And then the biggest thing is they become desperate. So they're desperate to better their situation, and sometimes they turn to bad things. Sometimes they, you know, they're desperate, so they're hiding the situation. I have a lot of families that hide from me the situation because I'm afraid I'm going to call social services and then I'm going to get their kids taken away. We don't remove kids. We meaning the county and the social workers don't remove kids just based upon them being homeless. And so there has to be other things, other factors, but they don't understand that. And so they're scared that if I tell you we're living out of our car for the last week, you're going to call social services and they're going to take my kids from me. So I'm not telling you, I'm just going to lie. They steal. So they're stealing to fill the mouths of their babes, for themselves. They're stealing, you know, to get money so they can get a place, so they can get gas, so that, you know, they're turning into stealing, lying, which we just talked about. And then reckless behavior, you know, just acting out, being angry, causing fights with people. Maybe the police are called, you know, putting themselves in risky situations. And then there's the illegal activity that they do. Maybe they start to sell drugs because it's a quick money and it's the only way they know how to get money, like right off the bat. And sometimes they can make a lot doing it. So why not? You know, what's the risk? I mean, my family doesn't eat, or I do this and maybe I get caught, you know, and sometimes they have to outweigh that. And unfortunately, they have to pick the illegal activity portion.
We have a couple comments and then a
Okay.
question. School is where they have stability and adults who care about them.
Yes.
Very true. My 7-year-old used to get stomach aches and I took him to many different doctors and everything was fine. We started treating his anxiety and now have no stomachs and haven't had stomach aches in months.
Yes.
And then the question, when you identify one of these kids, do they get emotional help besides getting a place to live?
Yeah, so we have just recently in Bismarck Public School Systems, we have psychologists that are assigned to certain schools. And so once we can identify those kids and you know, feeling like, hey, you know, probably need somebody to talk to, the school social worker from each building will help connect them to those resources. And we might go as far as to say, you know, they might need, if it's a younger child, you know, we might need to get them hooked up with services. So we help the parents. This is for younger ones. We help the parents, you know, get them hooked up with maybe somebody who does play therapy or something like that. But like the unaccompanied youth, the older ones, yeah, the school social workers do a really good job of screening them to make sure that, you know, hey, you know, you want to talk to somebody other. I mean, they always can come talk to that school social worker in the building all the time, but to get some more professional help from people definitely is something that they work on with the kiddos. Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to play this little video. I've watched it a million times, and every time I watch it, it still has the same effect on me. But I feel like I see some of the kids that I work with. I see them in this video, and it's super sad, and it's something very, you know, the concept of answering the phone is very simple. But sometimes, like on this video, it's you know, you don't know what's on the other end or what's going on the other end. So I just want to play that really quick if I can, if it lets me.
We don't have volume.
I'm sorry, what?
We don't have any volume for this.
Shoot, it's not playing any volume? Can nobody hear it?
Nope, can't hear it.
No, it's not playing.
No,
Oh.
not playing.
Okay. Well,
Hear it.
There's
okay. Well,
a way you can do it. I'm looking real quick here.
it says it's up. I can always come back to it if we figure it out. I'll just move on. So this is just a list of the services, excuse me, that our program can provide for these kids who are in transition. We help with the transportation, which is the biggest part because attendance is huge. But we also can pay off outstanding lunch balances if they come into the program. Obviously, this last year, we didn't have to deal with that because everybody got free lunches through the COVID relief fund. So any kid who is in an extracurricular activity, whether that's sports, music, any kind of a club, those kinds of things that we help pay for things like that. We help with college application fees. We'll pay for GED testing. We'll pay for graduation attire, and then backpacks and school supplies every year. We do have winter gear that we can provide the kids. That's anywhere from boots, snow pants, winter coat, hat, gloves, whatever they need. We have a lot of kids that walk, from all these different places. So it's good to have them all geared up for the winter. We can assist with Fafsa. So we have these kiddos, let's say they leave, their senior year, beginning of their senior year, they get kicked out of their house or they leave their house and now they're living with so-and-so. When it gets to the end of the year where they're, trying to apply for colleges and such, there's a form that I can fill out to say, this child was in my program, his senior year, he is considered homeless and in transition. And so you should not take any of his parents' income into play when you do his FAFSA or his financial aid. So that can be really, really helpful for some of these kids. And then just advocating for, if there's anything school related that they want to be a part of and there's a fee, talking to the building administrators about if they can waive that fee. They're all really good about doing that. And all these services, they last the entire year, no matter what. If they start my program in November, but then in January, they get permanent housing, they get a lease and everything. Those services follow them in the entire school year. And then everything resets in the summer, but they will get it. Just because they found a place just doesn't really mean the problem has gone away. So, excuse me. We talked about, them staying in their same school. That's kind of the biggest thing. We even do it from Mandan. So if kids start school here and then they land up over in Mandan because they got better housing or they got a housing option over there, we will provide transportation for them to come back over here to Bismarck for the rest of the school year. But if they're still in Mandan that following year, then they will register in the Mandan public school. So we have a VAN program, which is our transportation program that we created a year ago. We have basically school minivans that we hire drivers and they just go and pick up these kids, get them to school and get them from school. They get those options if they don't have their own transportation or if busing isn't an option, those kinds of things. Under the McKinney-Vento, a student who does not have their immunizations cannot miss any school. Per our policy, if you don't have your vaccinations after 30 days, you miss school until you get them. We can't do that for any of our SIT students. We can also demand birth certificates or any kind of documentation just to register them because a lot of them come when they don't have their paperwork. We talk about the services that we provide. One of the instances that was kind of outside the box is we had a kid who got into huge argument with her family beginning of her senior year 2 years ago. She was living with a family friend, had nothing, no birth certificate, no nothing. And because her parents refused to give it to her, they had it, but they refused to give it to her. We provided her the finances to be able to get her birth certificate, get everything. She also had already applied and been accepted to a college out in Washington. And she was super scared about not getting the information from her college about when you'd be here, paperwork she had to fill out. Her parents were not giving her mail. And so we went, and the program was able to purchase her a post office box for 6 months. And then she contacted the college and told them that this is what my new, address is. Please send all of my stuff to this post office box. So then she had access to it. Otherwise, she's like, I'm going to miss everything. I'm not going to know anything what's going on with school. So a lot of things, a lot of situations happen. You have to be creative about how can we help. Sometimes it's as simple as buying alarm clocks for families because they don't have a cell phone, so they don't have it on their phone to have an alarm. So we'll buy them alarm clocks. So just every family comes with their own unique situation. Here I just have for the Bismarck area, some of the places, the shelters that we talked about, some of the agencies that help out with housing, or if they need assistance with housing that we have here in town. So that's that. And then just my information that if you ever, if you're in the Bismarck area, even if you're not, and you want to know who's your local district person, who you can contact, you can always contact me. There is a list on the DPI website of all the liaisons in each district you have access to. But if you ever have any questions about families or students, you can sure give a call. And that's it.
Thank you. We have another question. Are there precautions taken so that a child in this situation does not have to deal with bullying from kids, such as privacy about what is being done to help them?
Okay, I'm just reading it here. Yeah, so most kids that we're helping, that we know are struggling with these kinds of things at home. We do our very best, and the building, the staff there, whatever school they're going to make things so they're not known. We only tell teachers when we feel like they absolutely need to know that situation. So like, let's say you have a child who's sleeping all day. Obviously, if we wouldn't communicate with that teacher, she really wouldn't know what's going on. So if we say, look, they're staying in their car, he doesn't get any sleep, or they're staying in a party house, he doesn't get any sleep. Just those information like that is very beneficial to that teacher to be able to help that learning process for him. And so we do share those kinds of things back and forth. And really the only people that know are that school social worker teacher and myself. As far as bullying goes, obviously the teacher's going to be super sensitive about if hearing anything, that kid, about their hygiene or, those kinds of things, and uses that as a moment within her whole entire class. It's just about bullying in general. But you actually would be super surprised to know that a lot of the kids, like I described the ones that were really severe, like a lot of our kids are so resilient, and they come and they don't want anybody to know. And so they'll come and they'll be clean. They'll figure out a way, and they'll have their clean clothes, and they'll have their hair combed, and they don't talk about what's, at home or this and that, whatever. But they're like starving inside. They're scared if somebody knows and finds out, they're going to get removed from their mom, because maybe that's what mom and dad have told them, don't tell anybody. And the older kids too, they want to try and hide it. They don't want it to be known that they're suffering like that. So they just keep to themselves and act like normal. And so those are the ones that we miss, because we don't know exactly what's going on, and so we're not able to help them. Let's see, where are we at?
Are the parents provided a listing of resources for services for themselves at all?
Yes, I have a community resource map, I call it. And so I give it, and it has everything on there. Anything from food to diapers, to housing, to jobs, to everything. I give them the resource map that our coalition has created here in Bismarck, the Homeless Coalition, and I give them out to the families. And then I also have a list of landlords that I got. I can't even remember who gave it to me, that do list to felons or are willing to work with people who have felonies on their record. So I give them that. And then also just any like the food pantry list, hot meal list, those kinds of things in town. for them to be able to get a hot meal every day. Yes.
Not to interrupt, but we also, and those of you that are in the Bismarck area, we do have these pocket resource guides too that have a variety of resources on them, very similar to the Homeless Coalition one. So if anybody needs any of those, please let me know and I can get those out to you as well. There's another question. Has an agency ever done a study to see if homeless children have a higher suicide rate?
I'm sure nationally there has. I don't know if there's been anybody locally that's done that. I would say if anybody would tackle that, it might be somebody like YouthWorks who works with youth specifically. Yeah, I mean, obviously just a normal assumption would be that, yeah, there would be a higher rate of suicide. But honestly, just working in the school systems and seeing all the different kinds of issues, there's just so many. And so I'm sure homeless would be up there for sure. Yeah.
Could we get those resource pack? Yes, I will. Jennifer Lambert, can you email me or I'll put my email in the chat box for those of you that would like some resource guides. And if you have information or a resource that you want added to the guide, please email me. So I'll get that in the chat box.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Oh, sorry.
We do have resource guides for Bismarck, Dickinson, Jamestown, Williston, Minot, Devil's Lake, and Turtle Mountain. So if you're in those areas and would like one, please email Kylie for that too.
I just want to say I appreciate you guys putting this as, as an issue that you want to present it on. I appreciate the landlords out there. I know I work with these families too, and I know it can be very disheartening and frustrating at times. So I just appreciate you taking that on with some of these families because I know it's not easy. And so I just want to let you guys know that that we appreciate that on our end too.
Thank you, Therese. It was very informative and heartbreaking. So.
yeah, anytime.
Yes, thank you, Charisse.
You're welcome.
And thank you guys all for attending today's session. Just a note, if you plan on attending next week's session, it will be on Thursday instead of Tuesday. So just make note of that. We will send out the reminder and then as well as the Zoom link next week. So again, next week's presentation is on Thursday. So thank you guys all for attending and hope you have a good rest of the week.